You made up that entire financial crisis for 2 weeks, and you f***ing lied to me?
I overheard your call to Yasmin. I know about the attorneys. I know about the separate account you've been quietly building.
You can't just
I have a notebook found in our bedroom closet, dated 10 months back. Color-coded. Red for assets, blue for legal steps, green for timing and strategy.
How do you know about the notebook? This is not fair. You deliberately manufactured a crisis specifically to...
The notebook was dated 10 months ago. I didn't build your plan. I showed you a situation where you revealed it. Sign it.
And 5 feet from where they slept, she had been keeping a month-by-month legal strategy to end it. But before you decide who the villain is, there is a document, a timestamp, a 2-minute phone call made that very same morning, before he walked through the door, before the lie, before any of it. And when that truth surfaces, it will reframe every single thing you think you understand about this marriage. Onyx Brooks sat in his own driveway for 11 minutes without moving, engine off, hands folded in his lap. The streetlights of West Ashley coming on one by one in the early November dusk. The magnolia trees on either side of the road standing dark and still against a sky the color of faded slate. Through the front windows of the house, the white-trimmed colonial on the quiet street he and Zaina had bought together 5 years ago, he could see the warm glow of the kitchen light. He had looked at that light every evening for nearly 6 years and felt, each time, the particular gratitude of a man who knows he has built something real. Tonight, he was rehearsing a lie he was about to tell inside it. Zaina, I think we're going to lose the house. He said it quietly, to no one, adjusted the cadence. Said it one more time, swallowed. Onyx Brooks was 38 years old, 6'2", broad across the shoulders, the kind of man who filled a doorway without trying. Dark, slim-fit shirts, a low fade kept neat. He drove 40 minutes each way to downtown Charleston every weekday as a senior development manager for a real estate firm connected to the port of Charleston. He came home every single night, made coffee before Zaina asked, remembered which grocery store she preferred and exactly why. He had repainted the second bedroom twice, not because the first color was wrong, but because the second one made her smile differently, and that had mattered to him enough to do it again. He believed love was proved in the small, ordinary moments. Not in grand gestures or expensive arrangements, but in the daily, faithful showing up that people stop noticing precisely because it is always there. His neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who ran her Hallmark channel from noon to midnight like a personal religion and dispensed marriage wisdom over the back fence without being asked, had once told him, "The secret to a long marriage is showing up even when the sofa looks better." He had laughed. He had also believed it completely, had been proving it quietly for nearly 6 years. Which is why he was sitting in the driveway rehearsing a lie. 3 months earlier, sometime in that late August when the South Carolina heat still refused to break, something had begun to shift. Not suddenly, not the way betrayal looks in films. In degrees. The way the Lowcountry moves between seasons, so gradually you never feel it happening, until one morning you look up and realize something has been different for a while, and you cannot say exactly when it began. Zaina Brooks was 35. She worked part-time at a wellness studio in Mount Pleasant, across the Ravenel Bridge. She had long box braids, usually pulled back, a dimple on her left cheek that appeared whether she wanted it to or not, and a laugh that couldn't wait for the punchline before it escaped. She made honey lemon tea when Onyx was sick, without being asked. She folded laundry while singing off-key to whatever was on the speaker, and somehow that made the whole house feel full in the particular way that ordinary things do when they add up to exactly where you want to be. But sometime that August, her questions changed. Not, "Did you eat, baby?" Not, "How was the drive?" "What's the house worth right now, do you think? Have you checked lately?" And, "Are you fully vested in your 401k or still in the waiting period?" And, "If there were layoffs, hypothetically, how long could we cover the mortgage on your salary alone?" He answered every one, because partners do. Then, 2 weeks before that Tuesday in November, he came home early from a sidewalk near the waterfront, parked quietly, walked in through the side door, and heard Zaina's voice drifting from the living room at the specific pitch she used when she didn't want words to travel far. She was on the phone with Yasmin Reed, her best friend since college. Sharp, perpetually opinionated, and genuinely bitter since her own divorce had been finalized 2 years prior. And Zaina said, unhurried and clear as anything, "I just need to wait a little longer, until the market gets better, or until we have enough leverage." Leverage. Onyx stood in the hallway for 30 seconds, then walked back outside and sat on the front porch steps until his heartbeat had the decency to settle. That night, while Zaina was in the shower, he borrowed her laptop. His mother, Zaina, 62, sharp, and constitutionally incapable of issuing optional requests, had asked him to bring sweet potato casserole to her church potluck that Saturday. He told himself he was looking for the recipe. He found the recipe. He also found what Zaina had forgotten to close. South Carolina divorce alimony length of marriage factor. How to maximize settlement after 6 years. A saved, sorted list of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in Charleston County. He closed the laptop slowly. He sat at the kitchen table, the one where they had signed the mortgage papers on a warm March afternoon 5 years ago, where Zaina had knocked over sweet tea and laughed until she cried, where the wood still held the ghost of that afternoon in a pale ring. And he sat there in the quiet of his own house for a long time. The refrigerator kicked on and startled him out of his own stillness. He looked at his watch. He had not realized how long he had been sitting there. The next morning, he called Zaina Harrington, his attorney. Slate gray suits, leather briefcase, $400 an hour earned in the first 10 minutes of any meeting. Zaina listened to everything. The search history, the overheard call, 3 months of careful questions about equity investing schedules without interrupting once. Then she said, "You could go home tonight and put this in front of her. Tell her what you found. See what she says." Onyx was quiet for a moment. "She has a list saved on her laptop," he said. "Divorce attorneys, sorted by how aggressive they are, 4 of them bookmarked." A pause. "This isn't a misunderstanding." Zaina nodded slowly. "Then you have every right to protect yourself. If she's timing this for maximum advantage, she'll show you exactly who she is the second she believes that advantage is gone." She looked at him steadily. "Are you ready to let her show you?" Onyx looked out the truck window at the fog lifting slowly off Savannah Highway in the November gray. "Yes," he said. He charged his phone, enabled the voice recorder. South Carolina is a one-party consent state. If you are present in a conversation, you may legally record it. He slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. He sat in the driveway for 11 minutes. Then Onyx Brooks walked through his own front door, looked at the woman he had quietly and completely loved for nearly 6 years, and said the words he had rehearsed 4 times on the drive over. "Zaina, I think we're going to lose the house." What she said next, and what she chose not to say, is the moment this entire story turned on its axis. Don't go anywhere, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about this marriage. She didn't reach for his hand. Nearly 6 years of marriage. Onyx had never consciously cataloged it as a rule, but it was there, woven into the fabric of how they moved through difficulty together, Anytime something went wrong, the water heater dying in December, the fender bender on I-26, the February he thought his position might be cut, Zaina reached for his hand first. Before the questions, before the logistics, before anything practical needed saying, her hand found his. This time, she set her mug down on the counter. Slow, deliberate. The specific movement of someone buying herself a private second to think. "What do you mean, lose the house?" she said. "Like, actually lose it?" Onyx told her the port project had collapsed, that layoffs were coming, that the mortgage numbers were more unforgiving than she knew. He kept his voice at the precise register of a man barely holding himself at the seams. Controlled worry, the kind that stays in the chest. It was one of the more difficult performances of his life, and he took no satisfaction in any of it. Zaina's eyes moved, not toward him, past him, the inward focused gaze of someone running figures behind their own expression. "How much equity do we have right now?" she asked. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What do we do together?" Not even, "Come here." How much equity do we have right now? He gave her a number, not the real one, a figure Zaina had helped him construct, carefully smaller than the truth. "And the savings?" Zaina asked. "Most of it's gone," he said. "I had to cover some things I hadn't told you about yet." She nodded, looked past him again, said, almost to herself, "I need to think." She went to bed at 9:30. Onyx stayed in the living room, the television low enough to ignore. At 10 o'clock, he heard her move to the kitchen. The careful quiet of someone trying not to be overheard. The house was old enough that voices traveled down the hall if you weren't careful about it. Zaina, believing him asleep on the couch, wasn't being careful. He heard it clearly. Her voice, low and urgent. "Yasmin, the timeline just changed." Yasmin's voice, thin through the phone speaker. "What happened?" "He says we might lose the house. Layoffs, the whole thing." "Then you need to call the second attorney, the one on Broad Street. Right now, Zaina, before the asset value drops further." A pause. A silence that had a particular shape to it. The specific stillness of someone being pulled in two directions at once. I already canceled that. This morning. I called the office and canceled the appointment." "Then you uncancel it." Yasmin's voice was flat, certain. "This is exactly what I warned you about. You cannot hesitate right now." Another silence. Longer. "Okay," Zaina said finally. Her voice was smaller than it had been. "Okay. I'll figure it out." Onyx lay in the dark and held very still. She had canceled it. That same morning, while he was sitting through meetings downtown, while he was eating a vending machine sandwich at his desk, while he was rehearsing the lie on the drive home. She had been pulling back, and Yasmin, in 5 minutes, had pulled her straight back in. Fear that has been building for months does not surrender to a 5-day-old decision the moment a crisis arrives. He understood that. He also understood it did not change what Zaina had been building, or how long she had been building it. Before sunrise, he was dressed and moving. He transferred half of their joint savings into a personal account. Every step documented, every move pre-cleared with Zaina. Changed the beneficiaries on his 401k and life insurance to his mother, Zaina. Then called Zaina from his truck, parked outside a Waffle House on Savannah Highway, fog moving slow over the asphalt in the November gray. "Keep playing the part," Zaina told him. He did. For 2 more weeks, Onyx played the role of a man drowning in slow motion. He talked about cutting groceries. mentioned maybe selling one of the cars. He watched Zaina carefully each time, the order of her questions, what she circled back to twice, what she never once asked. Her concern had the precise architecture of worry without the warmth underneath it. She never said, "We'll figure it out together." Never said, "I'm not going anywhere." One evening in the second week, he set a plate of pasta on the table and sat down across from her. She was on her phone. He asked how her day had been. She gave him one word and kept scrolling. He looked at her, at the woman he had married in a garden outside Savannah on a Saturday in May, who had laughed so hard during their vows she had to stop and take a breath. And he thought, this is what the end of a marriage looks like. Not a fight, just someone on their phone at dinner, not here. He ate his pasta and didn't say anything. On a Saturday 3 weeks after the lie, he and his friend Nash Thompson drove to the house to pick up a toolbox from the garage. Nash was 39, built broad and solid, with a round, open face and a loyalty that went back to 7th grade and had never required explaining. He had offered to help without asking why. That was Nash. Nash ducked into the bedroom closet for a drill bit and came out a moment later holding something that wasn't a drill bit. "This yours?" The notebook. Zaina's handwriting. 3 colors of ink, red for assets, blue for legal steps, green for timing and strategy, dated 10 months back. Page 1. The house's estimated value, their joint savings balance, Onyx's annual salary broken down precisely, his 401k balance, his exact vesting date. All of it exact. Page 2. A month-by-month legal timeline, documentation windows flagged. And at the bottom of the second page, in green ink, do not file before month 84 of marriage. Maximum leverage requires the 7-year threshold. Month 84. They were in month 70. She had been willing to wait 14 more months, more than a year, for the window she had calculated herself. In a color-coded notebook 5 feet from where they slept. Nash set one broad hand on Onyx's shoulder. Neither of them spoke. The afternoon light came through the bedroom blinds in long, even lines. The weight of what Onyx held in his hands was not paper. It was the documented proof that the life he had believed in had already been measured, evaluated, and scheduled for its conclusion, with 3 colors of ink and a month-by-month plan. "What do you need from me?" Nash said. "Be a witness," Onyx said. He walked to his truck. The divorce papers had already been filed that afternoon while they were driving over. Zaina's office had handled it. All that remained was the serving. Before I tell you what happened when those papers reached Zaina at the wellness studio, I have one question for you, and I want you to be honest, even just with yourself. If you found that notebook in your own home tonight, color-coded, 10 months of strategy, the words maximum leverage in green ink 5 feet from where you sleep, would you sit down across from the person you married and say, "I see that you're afraid. Tell me what's scaring you"? Or would you build the test? Drop a yes or no in the comments. Or tell me, have you ever been in a marriage where fear and money got so tangled up you couldn't tell them apart? Because when those papers land in Zaina's hands, what Onyx says in the next 4 words is something she will never forget for the rest of her life. The papers were served on a Wednesday morning at 10:44. Onyx was in a 4th-floor conference room, the Cooper River wide and unhurried beyond the windows, when his phone vibrated once on the table. He glanced at the screen. One line from the process server. Delivered. Received by Z. Brooks. He turned the phone face down. Answered a question about port access infrastructure with complete composure. Because Onyx Brooks had not been faking his professional life. Only this one thing. Only this. 11 minutes later, the phone rang. He stepped into the hallway. River light came through the tall windows in long, pale panels. He answered. What did you just do? Zaina's voice was held together precisely, the specific pitch of someone maintaining control by direct force of will. You said we were going to lose the house. You said layoffs were coming. And now you filed? Now? He let her finish. He watched the river. Zaina, I didn't lose my job. I'm not going to lose my job. There were no layoffs. Level, not cold. The way you speak when a decision is made and it's final. I invented the financial crisis. Silence. A silence with weight and shape and consequence inside it. What? I needed to see what you would do if you believed the money was gone, he said. You looked me in the face for 2 weeks and lied to me. I overheard your call to Yasmin the night I told you about the house, he said. I know about the attorneys you had already visited. I know about the separate account you've been building. He paused. And I have a notebook found in our bedroom closet, dated 10 months back, color-coded by category, with a month-by-month legal strategy for ending this marriage, including a filing window you calculated yourself. Month 84, the 7-year threshold. One deliberate beat. We are in month 70. The silence that followed was different from the first. The first had been shock. This one was comprehension. The specific, unmistakable sound of someone realizing that the ground they were standing on is not the ground they believe themselves to be standing on. How do you know about the notebook? Flat, not a question. Nash found it in the closet last Saturday. We have it. A sharp exhale. Whatever you think you heard, you can't just... I also have a recording, he said, of our own conversation the night I told you about the house. South Carolina is a one-party consent state. I was present. I was a party to the conversation, and I recorded it in my own home. Zaina has reviewed every minute of it. It's fully admissible. He paused. Your attorney will confirm this. He heard something give way on her end. Not dramatically, but the specific sound of a plan losing its structural footing when the ground beneath it shifts. This is not fair, her voice cracked. You manufactured a crisis specifically to... The notebook was dated 10 months ago, he said, even and unhurried. I didn't build your plan. I showed you a situation where you revealed it. A beat. The settlement terms are fair. No alimony. Asset division based on documented contributions. Sign it. He hung up. He stood in the hallway and looked at the river. The Cooper, wide and slow and ancient, moving the way it always had. Older than the buildings on either side of it. Older than any argument being conducted within its sight. He did not feel victorious. What he felt, when he found the word for it, was arrived. The particular, unwelcome sensation of reaching a destination you traveled toward for weeks while hoping at every step that you were wrong about where you were headed. The notebook had been real. The attorneys had been real. The separate account had been real. And so had 6 years of mornings making coffee before she asked. 6 years of always coming home. The repainted bedroom, the kitchen table, the sweet tea ring in the wood. All of it had been completely, entirely real. Which was the exact part that made standing in this hallway feel the way it did. Zaina called twice more that afternoon. He let both calls ring. She came to the house that evening. He opened the door before she could knock. She had been crying. Her box braids hung loose over one shoulder. All the careful composure of recent months had been stripped away entirely. What was left was just her face, just Zaina, standing at the threshold of the home they had shared, not knowing what to do with her own hands. Can I come in? Very quietly. The paperwork covers property access during the process, he said. Zaina's office sent the letter this afternoon. I'm not asking about the paperwork. Her voice broke slightly. I'm asking. Just us. Can we please talk? He looked at her. He held it all in the same moment. The notebook, maximum leverage in green ink, Yasmin's voice saying, "Then you uncancel it." The silence before Zaina said, "Okay." He held all of it, and the 6 years underneath it. And he said, gently and without apology, "There's nothing we need to say that can't go through our attorneys." He closed the door, not with a slam. The quiet, deliberate click of the deadbolt said everything slammed doors try too hard to say. He heard her stand on the porch for a few minutes. The old porch swing creaked once in the November wind. Then her footsteps on the front steps, her car starting, and the street returning to the ordinary silence of a Wednesday evening in West Ashley, where the magnolia trees held still and the neighbors had long since gone inside for the night. Onyx sat on the couch in the living room he had helped paint. He looked at his own hands resting on his knees, and in the quiet of the house, the thing he hadn't quite let himself look at directly made itself completely visible. Zaina had converted her fear into a notebook. He had converted his suspicion into a test. Neither of them had been willing to sit down across from the other and say plainly, "I'm afraid. Are you?" She had built a plan because she was terrified of losing everything. He had built a trap because he was certain she was planning to take it. Both of them had chosen strategy over honesty, at exactly the same time, in exactly the same marriage, from exactly the same fear, wearing two different faces. He understood this now. He didn't know yet how much it would matter. 3 days later, Nash forwarded him a single text. "Yasmin wants to meet. Says it's important." He stared at the name for a moment, then typed back, "King Street, Saturday, 11. Because what Yasmin Reed was about to tell him in that coffee shop would not just explain how this happened. It would pull the floor out from under everything he thought he understood about why. 22 days after the papers were served, Onyx walked into a coffee shop on King Street and found Yasmin Reed already at the corner table, waiting. She had called him herself. But Zaina had sent her. That was the first thing Yasmin said, before anything else. "Zaina asked me to come. She wanted someone who could look you in the eye when they handed you what she needed you to have." She had on a sharp blazer, large gold earrings, both hands around her coffee. The expression of someone who had rehearsed this conversation and arrived knowing the rehearsal wasn't enough. She didn't make small talk. "I planted the idea," she said. Onyx sat down. He waited. "The financial protection language. The know your worth before the conversation, not after talk. The leverage thinking, the timing strategies. All of it started with me." She met his eyes and held them. "After my own divorce settlement came through, I started telling Zaina everything I'd learned. About how marital assets appreciate over time. About how women who protect themselves in advance are the ones who come out okay. And the ones who trust without preparation are the ones who end up with nothing." She paused. "I thought I was sharing hard-won wisdom. What I was actually doing was handing her the complete playbook from my failed marriage and laying it over yours, as if the two situations were the same." "You were talking about your ex-husband," Onyx said. "Not me." "Yes." She didn't flinch. "I know that now. At the time, I couldn't see the line. When you have been hurt in a specific way, you start seeing warning signs of that same hurt everywhere, even in places where it simply doesn't exist. I took my own unresolved fear and delivered it to my best friend as advice. She trusted me." A pause. "She shouldn't have trusted me on this." Here is the truth at the center of this story that is both simple and, once you see it, impossible to look away from. Wounds do not stay inside the people who carry them. They travel outward, quietly, dressed as love, dressed as caution, dressed as I just don't want you to end up the way I did. They arrive as advice, as protection, as wisdom from someone who has been through it and wants to spare you the same. And the person receiving them doesn't know they're inheriting a wound. They think they are receiving a gift. There's more, Onyx said. Yasmin refolded her hands on the table. I drove her to the second attorney, the one on Broad Street, 3 weeks before you told her about the house. Her voice was steady, the voice of someone saying what they came to say without finding a softer way to say it. She had already consulted the first attorney on her own, months earlier. I thought the first one was too measured, too slow. I wanted someone harder in her corner, someone who wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't soften anything, wouldn't let sentiment slow down a strong position. So I took her myself, and I sat in the waiting room, and I told myself I was looking out for her. She looked at him directly. I genuinely believed that. The coffee shop went about its business around them. A door opening briefly, someone at the counter, the acoustic guitar at a volume just low enough to talk under. One more thing, Yasmin said. The way people say something, they have been deciding the entire conversation whether to say and choose at the very last moment to say anyway. Your mother talked to Zaina, more than once, over time, about when your father left, about what that cost your family, about how Zaina had nothing protected, how she rebuilt from almost nothing. She was careful here, precise. Your mother was not doing anything wrong. She was being honest, sharing her own real story with the woman her son had married. But Zaina didn't hear it as history. She heard it as a forecast, as a preview of the ending she was walking toward if she wasn't careful enough. Onyx sat with that for a long moment. He thought about Zaina, 62 years old, the emergency cash in the jar behind the linen closet that had been there his entire childhood. Every bill paid before its due date, not from organization, but from the specific, bone-deep, earned fear of a woman who had once watched financial security disappear without warning, and who had spent every year since making absolutely certain it could never happen again. He had grown up inside that fear so completely that he had stopped seeing it as fear. It was simply the texture of his world, the background of how his family moved through life. He had never once stopped to consider what it might have looked like from the outside, what a young woman learning to belong to this family might have heard in Zaina's stories. Not just grief, not just history, but instruction. This is what happens. This is how it ends. This is what you do to make sure it doesn't end that way for you. Zaina's fear became Zaina's inheritance. Yasmin's divorce became Zaina's blueprint. And not one person in that chain had intended harm. Each was doing what felt, from the inside, like an act of love. Each was passing something forward that had never been named or examined for what it actually was. Yasmin reached into her bag and set a plain white envelope on the table. Onyx on the front, in Zaina's handwriting. Just his name, the O wide and soft the way she had always written it. There are 2 things inside, Yasmin said. One from her, and one she wanted you to see for yourself. He picked up the envelope, put it in his jacket pocket. He looked at Yasmin one last time, past the blazer, past the earrings, past the version of herself she had been leading with since before her own divorce was even finalized. You need to talk to someone, he said, quietly and without heat. Not about Zaina, about yourself. What happened in your marriage is still making decisions on your behalf. It cost Zaina her marriage. It will keep costing the people around you until you set it down. Her jaw tightened for a moment. Then, without performance, she nodded. He read the letter in the second document that night at the kitchen table, under the kitchen light. The letter was not 3 composed pages. It was closer to 2, written the way something gets written in the middle of a hard feeling rather than after it. Some sentences were complete, Some stopped before they finished and started again from a different direction. She still loved him, had always loved him. The fear had never been about him, had come from everything before him, and she had never learned to separate the two. She knew what she had built, had known it while building it, had told herself it was rational, had always known it was scared. She was in therapy now, real sessions, hard ones. She was sorry. And then, folded separately inside the same envelope, was a printed copy of an email, addressed to her attorney, time-stamped, dated 5 days before Onyx had come home and told her they were going to lose the house. I need to step back from everything we've discussed. I want to try couples therapy first. I think I've already hurt Onyx more than he knows just by going this far, and I don't want to make it worse. Please hold everything until you hear from me again. He read it once, set it on the table beside the letter, stood up, walked to the kitchen window, and put both hands flat on the counter. The street outside was dark and quiet. A car passed slowly under the magnolias, its headlights sweeping the front yard and disappearing. Then another. The ordinary world, carrying on its ordinary business, entirely unaware of what was sitting on his kitchen table. He stood there for a while. When he finally picked up his phone to answer Nash's text, "You good?" his hands were not entirely steady. He noticed this the way you notice things you didn't expect to notice about yourself. "Getting there," he typed. He didn't read all of the letter that night. Some of it he folded back into the envelope and left on the table. He wasn't ready for all of it yet. The next morning, Zina Harrington called. What she showed him would complete the picture, and in doing so, would reframe every decision made in the past 3 months, including every decision Onyx himself had made. Zina's office, Broad Street. Paper quiet and disciplined, the kind of room designed to hold difficult truths without flinching. She opened a folder without preamble. Zina's attorney submitted this voluntarily with the settlement documentation. Zina included it herself, her way of asking for the equitable resolution rather than the adversarial one. He leaned forward. He had already seen the email. It was the document Zina had enclosed in the envelope with her letter. But seeing it here, in a legal submission, in Zina's office, gave it a different weight entirely. I need to step back from everything we've discussed. I want to try couples therapy first. I think I've already hurt Onyx more than he knows just by going this far, and I don't want to make it worse. Please hold everything until you hear from me again. There's something else, Zina said. She turned a second page toward him, a phone log. Also part of the disclosure. Her cell records show a call placed to the Broad Street attorney's office on the morning of the same day you came home with the story about the house. It lasted less than 2 minutes. She held his gaze. The appointment was canceled before you walked through the door. Onyx sat back. She had written to the first attorney 5 days before the lie. She had called the second attorney's office the morning of the lie. She had been pulling back on 2 fronts simultaneously. And then he had walked through the door with a fabricated financial crisis, and every layer of fear she had spent years absorbing had rushed in at once. Here is what those 2 documents together meant, and it takes sitting with them fully to hold the weight of it. The test had been built to catch Zina's true intentions, and it did. But the intention it caught her in was not the one operating on that morning. Crisis does not give frightened people the chance to be the version of themselves they recently and carefully decided to become. It sends them straight back to the one they were trained to be. The test had arrived at the exact moment the truth was already making its way to him. Onyx was still for a long time. Long enough that Zina did not speak again. She simply waited, the way careful people wait when they understand the silence is doing necessary work. Sign the settlement as drafted, he said finally. He stood. One more thing. Do you know a good family attorney you could recommend to Yasmin Reed? Someone she can call if she has unresolved business from her own divorce. Not a favor, just a referral from someone I trust. Zina wrote a name on her legal pad without hesitation. I know exactly the right person. 2 weeks later, Onyx drove to Shem Creek in Mount Pleasant, the waterfront walkway. Late afternoon light coming gold and wide across the channel, shrimp boats moving in the current the way they always had. She was there before him. The box braids were gone, natural hair now, loose around her face. She had lost some weight. She looked like someone who had been choosing, deliberately and on purpose, to sit with hard things. They walked the dock before either of them spoke. "I've been thinking about your mother," Zina said. "She wasn't trying to scare me. I understand that now. She was being honest, sharing her own story with the woman her son married. But I heard it as a warning, as a preview of what was coming for me if I wasn't careful enough." She looked at the water. "That wasn't fair to her, and it meant you had no way of knowing what I was carrying, which meant you had no way to help me put it down." "No," he said, "I didn't." She stopped at the railing. He stopped beside her. "I want to say something clearly," she said. Not from the fragile, unfinished place the letter had come from somewhere steadier, something she had worked toward. You were a good husband, a genuinely good husband. I let fear convince me to treat you like a liability instead of a partner. That belongs to me, not to you. He looked out at the water, the channel, slow and wide, older than either of their grief. I forgive you, he said. He meant it, not as a gift to her, and not because the hurt had stopped. He meant it as a decision about his own life. Because forgiveness is not the feeling that arrives when pain is finally finished. It is the choice you make to stop handing the person who hurt you the keys to your future. It is a decision about who you intend to be on the other side of what happened. It has almost nothing to do with them. I owe you honesty too, he said. The test, choosing evidence over conversation, that was also a choice not to trust you. I was afraid, and instead of saying so, I built a case. Neither of us ever sat down and said, I'm scared. Let's just talk. We both made that choice. She was quiet for a moment. We were both afraid of the same thing, she said softly. And we managed to destroy each other, trying to protect ourselves from it. Yes, he said. That's exactly right. They stood at the railing a few minutes longer, not as people looking for a way back, but as two people who had decided to stop carrying what the other one had done to them. Then Zaina turned to face him. Before I go, she said, there's something you need to know about that morning, the morning you came home. She held his gaze steadily. You don't have the full picture of what was happening on my end, and I think you deserve to hear it. I canceled the appointment with the second attorney, Zaina said, the one on Broad Street. I canceled it the morning you came home and told me we were going to lose the house. I had a 2 o'clock that afternoon. I called before you walked through the front door. She held his gaze without wavering. I know, he said quietly. She looked at him. Zaina had your phone records, he said. She showed me the call log. Less than 2 minutes, that morning, before you came home that evening. He paused. I've known since Monday. Something moved across her face. Relief, or the specific grief of someone learning they were seen even in their best moment. Then you know I was already stopping, she said. I had written to the first attorney 5 days before. I had a counselor's name saved in my phone. I was going to tell you that same weekend. I had the whole conversation planned out in my head. How I'd start it, what I'd say. How I'd try to explain the fear without making it an excuse. She did not look away. And then you walked in and said we were losing the house. And the woman I was trying to become didn't have enough ground under her yet to hold against the one I'd spent years being trained to be. He looked at her. I walked through that door with a lie already loaded, he said. I know. Zaina nodded, small, final. Then she turned and walked down the dock. He watched her go. That was the last time he saw Zaina Brooks. He sat in the Shem Creek parking lot for a long time afterward. He didn't start the car right away. He sat while the last of the afternoon light left the water, gold fading to gray to the particular flat dark of an early November evening. A line of pelicans moved low over the channel in single file. He watched them until they were gone. He noticed at some point that the car had grown cold. He had been sitting long enough for the November air to find its way in. He sat in it anyway. He thought about the driveway, the 11 minutes, the practiced words, the voice recorder he had charged and tucked into his jacket pocket, certain he was being careful, certain he was being smart. He thought about what it costs when two people who love each other choose strategy at the exact same moment. Both of them protecting themselves from a fear they share, neither of them knowing the other is just as afraid. Both of them building very precise paths to losing exactly what they came to protect. He thought about his mother, the jar behind the linen closet, the fear she had carried for decades without naming it and passed forward without meaning to. He thought about Yasmin and the divorce she had been living inside long after it was over. He thought about the long chain of it, how a wound becomes advice, becomes a blueprint, becomes a plan, becomes an ending, and how not one person in that chain had chosen any of it deliberately. Then he started the car and drove home. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in February, Onyx was at the farmers market in Marion Square, the wide green park at the center of Charleston, old brick buildings on all 4 sides, vendors selling honey and handmade things and tomatoes under soft winter light. He was standing in front of a table of heirloom peppers, blocking them completely without realizing it, when a woman behind him laughed lightly and said, "Excuse me." Her name was Lila, 36 years old. She worked in historic preservation, documenting old buildings before they could be lost. When she told him, he thought it said something genuinely honest about a person, that they believed things worth saving deserved the work of saving them. She was quietly attentive in the way that made ordinary conversations feel larger than they were, and she looked directly at you when she spoke. They talked for 17 minutes beside the pepper table. He drove home with tomatoes, peppers, and her number on a torn piece of brown paper bag. He called her on Monday. Not because he felt entirely ready. Not the clean, complete, healed and whole version of ready that people wait for. But because he had learned the difference between waiting for a feeling to arrive and deciding to become it. Readiness isn't something that happens to you. It's something you practice, one honest choice at a time, until the choosing becomes the life you are building. In early October, nearly 1 year to the day from the night he sat in his own driveway rehearsing a lie, Onyx drove to the Battery, the old seawall at the southern tip of Charleston, where the promenade curves along the harbor and the water opens wide toward Fort Sumter and the open horizon beyond. He stood at the railing and looked at the port he had worked beside for 9 years. The cranes, the container ships moving slow and certain through the channel. He thought about the kitchen table, the sweet tea ring in the wood, the mortgage papers, the evening when the kitchen light had still felt like something he had built and was grateful for. He thought about what it costs to test someone's love instead of simply saying out loud that you were afraid of losing it. He thought about two people choosing strategy over honesty at the same moment, from the same fear, and losing each other in the same breath. And then, because it had mattered enormously, because it had shaped him in ways he was still discovering, and because carrying it was no longer the life he intended to live, he let it go. A cargo ship moved through the harbor, heavy, slow, and unhurried, carrying something significant across a long distance, arriving without announcement, doing the work regardless. He watched it pass. Then he turned and walked back to his car. Nash had texted 3 times already. His mother would require full details and would accept nothing vague. Lila wanted to show him a 19th century building she was working to save before the city lost it. He had a life, whole, his own, moving in the only direction life is willing to travel: forward. This story teaches us 3 things worth writing on a note card and keeping in your kitchen drawer. First, fear borrowed from someone else's heartbreak is still borrowed. Before you warn the people you love about what men do or what marriages become, ask yourself whose story you are actually telling. Second, when you are afraid of losing someone, the most dangerous thing you can do is test them instead of telling them. A test only catches who someone is under pressure. A conversation gives them the chance to be who they actually want to be. Third, in any relationship, marriage, friendship, family, the moment both people stop talking and start keeping score, the relationship is already over. It just hasn't finished falling yet. If someone in your life is pulling away right now, don't build a case. Make coffee, sit down, say the true thing first. That is the whole lesson. Behind every viral, tear-jerking script is a human heart that felt pain, hope, and injustice first. AI was merely a helpful assistant in shaping the words so the message of empathy and courage could reach wider audiences. Production team: story and screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Nguyen. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Nguyen. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.